There are so many episodes on YouTube that you could be watching, so I feel extremely privileged that you chose to click on mine. Thank you so much for doing that. This is Figuring It Out, the place where we have real and from the heart conversations. I'm your host Aggie, and today we're going to be talking about unconscious bias in the workplace. Let's figure it out. This is my story. This is my experience. I don't know if I take myself as a focus group of one, if it is representative of other people's experiences. But I just wanted to share this to strengthen someone else out there who is feeling very black, who is feeling too colored, who is feeling a little bit lost or a little bit too different. Do not get me wrong, I really celebrate being a black woman. I celebrate the flair, the color, just the exoticness that we bring with us, the dance, the beats, the creativity, the strength that we bring with us. And I was born and raised in Ibanda, a small village in Uganda, and started from there, and now I'm here in Berlin, Germany, where I have lived for the last 12 years. But until I came to Germany, I never really busied myself with the thought of the skin, the color of my skin, right? I just saw myself as a creative person, as an expressive person, as an intelligent and curious person who is just, out there to enjoy life, take it by its horns, and learn and grow and expand. And then I moved to Germany, where I am obviously a minority, and I was the only black woman at my university, and I started to realize that I am different. It did not bother me. I liked being different. Even when I was in Uganda, I did that through the way that I dressed, through the way that I expressed myself, the scarves, the jewelry, just the way you kind of like show up. I showed up a little bit different, at least in my humble opinion. But here it was different. It was different. It was me raising my hand in class to get a professor's attention so I could answer a question that he had posed to the class and having to be ignored. It was me one day showing up at my university with my afro out and having around 300 people gather around me to touch my hair. It was me taking part in group work and having to struggle to get even my group mates to take me seriously. And don't get me wrong, by the time I came to this country, I was as whole as I could be. I knew how to speak up for myself. I knew how to get my idea across, but I was hit by a lot of bias. Bias takes on so many faces. It takes on, first of all, the face of being ignored, where you're trying to take part in a conversation and you just realize that there's an unspoken code where you are more or less expected to simply keep your opinion to yourself. Bias also takes the form of pretending not to understand. So you explain something to somebody in a group, and the person that you're talking to is first of all not keeping eye contact, and secondly they somehow seem to want to insinuate that the way that you're explaining it overcomplicates it so they don't get it. The funny thing is though that as soon as someone else in that group, in that circle, reiterates what you just said, all of a sudden that person who didn't get it when you said it gets it when another person says it. The other face that the unconscious bias takes on is that people just simply expect you to deliver substandard results because you look a certain way, because you are from a certain race. And they might not say it out loud, but you also start to see patterns on how they treat other people that are not from their race. So unconscious bias is real, and unconscious bias has to be addressed in the workplace and also just in the way that we deal with each other, because it does actually really affect psychological safety. It affects mental wellness in the workplace. In my journey in the workplace, I have learned, especially over the last 2 to 3 years, I have learned to be very on point with it, like to address it in the moment that it happens. So if I'm having a conversation with somebody and they, for instance, start to meander with their eyes, so to lose eye contact and not to pay attention, I call them by name. So let's just take an example that I'm talking to a group, but I'm addressing John, for instance. Then I will say, so John, do I have your attention? This is the point that I was trying to make. What have you heard versus what I just said? Because that forces the person to actually really plug in and listen to what I am saying. And I do not bring in the emotional part of trying to address it in the sense of I am a woman and I have a feeling that you're not listening to me. But I put them on point, because when you do that, then their intelligence and their face is also at stake. And that really helps to kind of like bring those people who are not trained in the sense of how they hold conversations and how they perceive and view other people's opinions. If they're not taking it seriously, they're not thinking about how you're going to feel after the conversation. They're not thinking that that your opinion is actually also valuable. They are not thinking that the greatest and healthiest salad is actually the one that has the hugest variety of ingredients. Anyways, so another form that unconscious bias takes is where you basically are simply not taken seriously. So when you raise an issue, it is not handled with as much seriousness as when someone else raises it. And what that basically means is that your experience is not validated. But if you live on this side of the world, you know that Black people can exist in the same space as white people and have two completely different experiences. And that is why it's extremely important for managers and for companies to really be present and to receive and respect each person's experience, because unless you are that person, you really cannot begin to even empathize or even understand or even realize what their experience is. So you must trust their story, you must trust their narrative, and you must learn to work with it. And another version or another face of the unconscious bias is also it's in things like, can you wear your hair the way that you would like to wear your hair and still be taken seriously? Can you show up in corporate spaces as with all your blackness, you know, with all with your hair, for instance, adjusting its shape and texture and form because of the way that it is naturally made to adjust. So if it rains, for instance, you know your afro is going to shrink. Can you show up with all of that in the workplace and still be taken seriously? How do you know when you're being taken seriously? These are things that you instinctively feel in your gut. You know when you're holding a conversation with somebody, you can sense when you're losing them. You can sense when they look at you a certain way. And I want to just encourage you that when people do that, it is not so much because of you or your hair or even the color of your skin. It is because of their lack of exposure. whenever somebody engages me in a conversation about my hair, what I realize in my mind and also through the experience is that they've not traveled enough. They have not been exposed enough. They have a very homogeneous group that they hang out with, and therefore they are oblivious and ignorant of other cultures and other experiences and other textures and other shapes and other ideas, and this otherness can be very, very overwhelming. So unconscious bias is also something that expresses itself as a fear of the unknown, and sometimes it is, of course, oftentimes it is covered up in either microaggressions or polite deflections or just outright ignorance. That doesn't excuse it. We have a lot of work to do, but I would like to encourage fellow Black people or people of color that use this as an opportunity to educate, use this as an opportunity to very respectfully call out that behavior. When you have beers on a Friday evening, use some of those conversations as an opportunity to awaken people to the experience that you're having, that different experience, though you are existing in the same environment. I'm very passionate about this. I'm very passionate about people's intelligence not being undermined. I'm very passionate about our ideas being heard. I'm very passionate about a world where we are awakened to the fact that what makes us rich lies in what makes us different. You know, that the goal is not for people to necessarily integrate in the sense that they immerse themselves in the culture of the countries where they reside so much so that they forget their roots, but the idea is that you bring your roots with you and that you express yourself in all of your being. You bring your different way of working, you bring your different music, you bring your different way of dressing, so that we can have products that speak to the globe and not just to specific specific areas or a specific type of people. We need this. The world is breaking down when you think about it from a cyberspace perspective. The world, the boundaries are breaking down, but that is where it is even more important to bring your uniqueness across. And there's a price to pay. There's a battle to fight. There's a strength that is going to be needed, and there's also immense opportunity, but there's also a need to repeat ourselves until the point gets heard. And we are facing, though the internet opens up the entire world, we have to understand that the algorithms that are studying our phones and are studying our computers are narrowing us down to a certain pattern of content that actually makes us even more biased than we ever were before. And that is why it is even harder to get people to understand some of these things, to get people to see some of these, you know, discriminative behavior, this judgmental behavior, because although we have the web and we feel like the internet opens us up to an entire world, we have these algorithms that narrow our perspective. And that is why it's even more important that instead of taking that pain of the unconscious bias experience, taking it home with you and simply talking about it with your family who are also experiencing the same, it's very important that you find the bravery to address it in the workplace, in that very place where it's actually taking place, and not so much from an accusatory perspective, because even we as Black people have a way that we see white people. You know, we have historical stories that have been told to us. We have experiences that we've gone through that have kind of like cemented our narrative or our perception of other races. But we too have to, you know, open up to hear what is your story as it pertains to today. And they have to also open themselves up to what is your experience as it pertains today. But one thing that we do have is the spirit of discernment, where you can kind of like sense when it is taking place. And I pray that you get the wisdom to know in that moment in time how you can kind of speak to it while it's still hot, you know, because if you wait days, if you wait for the next experience, if you hold it in, then you are not solving. And perhaps also you can, you know, start having conversations about how you can introduce trainings. There are professionals out there that are specialized on training for breaking the unconscious bias, you know, especially in international companies where obviously diversity and inclusion have become the topic of the day. There are opportunities to address some of these issues. There are opportunities to have forum discussions around this so that people become aware that though we can exist in the same exact space, we can be having a completely different experience. So, for the beautiful young Black woman that is watching this episode, for the young Black gentleman that is watching this episode, I want to tell you that you are beautiful, you are loved, you are accepted, and you have people like myself routing for you. You have people like Maya Angelou that made the statement that though you show up as, you know, you show up as one, you stand as 10,000. We are in this together. We feel the pain together, but we also share in the victories. And we have a great responsibility to be very open and respectfully address some of these issues so that our children that come after us, they can have a different experience. I know I have, for instance, a German family that I really like my own family. Like, we have shared food at the same table, we have shared clothes, we have slept in the same bed. It is possible to break these boundaries. It is harder, of course, in the workplace, but it is possible to break these boundaries and to richly share our experiences without belittling or deflecting or ignoring each other. So be the light and know that you are not in this alone, and that you get to be a trailblazer when you address this. You get to be a change maker, and you get to be a bearer of light. So go out there and shine, and may God grant you the wisdom to know how to steer some of those difficult conversations, but do not look away and do not shy away from having some of those difficult conversations, because the greater good that this will bring is so totally worth it. Thank you so much for giving me your time, and may you experience a very fulfilling and productive week this week. I look forward to seeing you again in my next episode. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. Please do share my episodes with other people, and invite your friends and family to become part of our nation here at Figuring It Out. Yeah. God bless you, and see you again in my next episode. Bye-bye.